Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Hammered Corner. In today's video, we have an introduction into the coinage of Henry VIII. But just before we jump into the video, make sure you give the video a thumbs up and click that subscribe button so you never miss a video here on the channel. On screen now, you can see displayed timestamps, so you can easily refer to certain parts of the video in the future. Henry VIII is one of the most known English kings, referred to as the man with 6 wives, and is often taught in schools. Henry reigned from 1509 to 1547 and was the first English monarch from the House Tudor. He ruled presiding over sweeping changes that brought his nation into the Protestant Reformation. He married 6 wives in his search for political alliance, marital bliss, and a healthy male heir. His desire to annul his first marriage without papal approval led to the creation of a separate Church of England. Of his 6 marriages, 2 ended in annulment, 2 in natural deaths, and 2 with his wives' beheadings for adultery and treason. His children, Edward VI, Mary and Elizabeth, would each take their turns as England's monarch. Henry VIII was actually the first English monarch to be called Your Majesty. Before this, they were referred to as Your Grace or Your Highness. After the Holy Roman Empire, Charles V began being called Your Majesty in 1519, and Henry VIII could not be outdone, so he adopted the term himself. Numismatically, Henry's reign is very interesting, with his adopted name Old Copper-Nose. During the English Reformation, Henry's kingdom amassed great wealth and property by confiscating Catholic monasteries. Nonetheless, by the end of his reign, Henry's funds ran low, and he was forced to lower the percentage of silver in his coinage, to the point where they were mostly copper, with a silver coating that wore away from the high relief parts of Henry's face, starting with the highest part of the coin, his nose. This meant that he could mint coinage that would contain a high amount of silver, but the silver was replaced by copper, and the crown kept the silver to fund extravagant Tudor lifestyles and the wars against Scotland and France. But this caused a huge economical problem. By 1551, the coinage was worth 1/4 to 1/6 of its intrinsic value. For example, a groat, normally worth 4 pence of silver, was now worth 1 pence. The increase in minting caused by increased base metal resulted in inflation, and more people hoarding older coins that were of higher precious metal percentage. It wasn't until the Reformation under leadership of John Dudley, Duke of Northumberland, in the reign of Edward VI had begun, but it wasn't complete until the 1560s under Elizabeth I. The Reformation involved melting all debased coins and reissuing new ones with the correct amount of precious metals, and it's a real shame that his coins are rare in top grade, and unfortunately has the high price tag to go with it. So firstly, we categorise Henry VIII's coinage into 3 main periods. The first coinage minted between 1509 and 1526, the second coinage minted between 1526 and 1544, and the third coinage minted between 1544 until his death in 1547. Throughout these coinages there is a huge change in the coin design, so let us first look at the gold coinage minted during his reign. But before we do, in 1526, in an effort to prevent the drain of gold to the continental Europe, the value of English gold was increased by 10%. So, firstly we have the largest gold denomination, the sovereign, with king enthroned, that was worth 20 shillings, and 22 shillings and 6 pence when the weight of the sovereign increased in the second coinage. We then have the real, with king in ship holding sword and shield, that was worth 10 shillings. We then have the angel that was worth 6 shillings and 8 pence, and then 7 shillings and 6 pence in the second coinage. The half angel that was worth 3 shillings and 4 pence, and then 3 shillings and 9 pence. And the third coinage saw the introduction of the quarter angel. We then have the rarer coins introduced in the second coinage, starting with the George noble that was valued at 6 shillings and 8 pence, and the half George noble that was worth 3 shillings and 4 pence. We then have the introduction of the crown of the rose worth 4 shillings and 6 pence, and the crown of the double rose worth 5 shillings. And finally we have the crown and half crown. Now interestingly, the crown of the double rose and the half crown all display initials on the obverse, either side of the crowned rose. This depicts that of the wife at the time, HI for Jane Seymour, HA for Anne Boleyn, and is how we can differentiate different coinages as numismatists. Here is a side-by-side comparison of 2 sovereigns. The one on the left is a coin minted in the second coinage, and the coin on the right was minted in the third coinage. Both have similar designs with king enthroned, but it is very clear to see the advancements in the king's portrait, which shows the designs that we are very accustomed to seeing nowadays. So now let us look at the silver denominations minted under Henry, and there are no differences to that of his father's coinage. So first off we have the farthing, the halfpenny, the penny, the half-groat or 2p, the groat or 4p, and finally the Test Dune. The Test Dune was the forerunner to the shilling and was introduced by Henry VII in such small quantities that many believe they weren't issued for circulation at the time of minting around 1489. The Test Dune was minted in the last issue of Henry VIII's coinage and was very debased, weighing around 6.5 grams, of which should have been mostly silver. But this issue, like Henry's later coinages are, has a high amount of base metal, and as a result these coins are extremely expensive, even in low grade. The Test Dunes were minted in London, Southwark and Bristol, and the Test Dune was issued into the early part of Edward VI's reign before he reintroduced it as the shilling. So because Henry's coinage was so debased by the end of the third coinage, they're often dug up in such poor condition. So let us just compare the three portrait designs that were used in the three coinages. The first coinage saw the portrait designed and introduced by Henry VII, that replaced the medieval style design that had been used since the introduction during the reign of Edward I. The second coinage saw the young lacquer bust of the king facing right, and finally the third coinage saw a more realistic portrait of the king, portraying him more accurately matching that of his paintings. So now we're on to his mint marks. During his reign, at different points there were 7 mints in operation: the Tower Mint, Southwark, York, Canterbury, Bristol, Dublin and Durham House. So we can use these mint marks at the top of the obverse and reverse to see where the coin was minted, and we can even pin down the year range too. So all you need is a Sphinx book. So let us use the Henry VIII groat that we saw at the beginning. Comparing my coin to my Sphinx book, I can see that mine matches that of the list mint mark, or 105 as a key number. Now this is quite a good example, as the list mint mark was used in all 3 coinages. So how do we pin it down? Well, we know that it can't be the first coinage, as that was when he issued coins with his father's portrait and doesn't match mine. We know that this isn't the second coinage, as this was when he issued groats with the lacquer busts, young busts facing right, and it doesn't match mine. So we know that this was minted in the third coinage between 1544 and 1547, as the bust on my coin now matches the busts issued during this period, and with a bit more research we can pinpoint my coin to the Sphinx number in the book. So next we will look at the legends and the shield design on Henry's coins, starting on the obverse. The legend begins at the right of the mint mark and translates to Henry VIII, by the grace of God, King of England, France and Ireland. His later issue of coins have the addition of HIB in the legend, meaning Ireland, when Henry was given the title of King of Ireland in 1541, but more on that on the next part. Flipping over to the reverse, starting on the right of the mint mark again, the legend translates to I have made God my helper, and looking at the shield design, the arms of England were quarterly, with the lilies of France in the first and fourth quarters and the lions of England in the second and third quarters. Even though Henry was titled King of Ireland in 1541, the introduction of the Irish heart wasn't introduced until the end of the Tudor line, when the King James of England united Scotland, England and Ireland in 1603. So following on from that, we will now look at some of the Irish coins minted during Henry's reign. No coinage was produced specifically for Ireland during the first 26 years of Henry's reign. A Tudor who believed in the central control of organs of state, particularly with regard to its fundraising aspects, it was in keeping with Henry's policies that when a decision was taken to mint Irish money again, it was to be coined in London rather than Ireland. The new coins, known as heart groats, together with half groats, were made of silver debased slightly below the sterling standard, and, after the second debasement in 1540, were forbidden to be re-imported into England. As on the 3-crowned coinage of the previous reign, the obverse type was the Royal Arms of England, though now the shield was crowned, and on the reverse a large crowned Irish harp appears for the first time in the Irish coinage. Following the King's clash with Rome, an Anglo-Irish parliament was prevailed upon to recognise Henry as supreme leader of the Church in Ireland, and in June 1541, in order to dispose of the belief widely held amongst the Irish that the kings of England only held the temporal lordship of Ireland from the Pope, an act was passed declaring Henry to be King of Ireland. There were 6 issues of groats and half-groats from 1534 until his death in 1547. From the first issue to the last issue, the silver content went from 0.842 finesse to 0.250 finesse, each bearing the crowned Irish harp, bearing the king's initials with that of the wife at the time of minting. Now, Henry didn't issue coinage with his portrait on. It was only during the posthumous coinage of the reign of his son, Edward VI, that his portrait was issued on currency from 1547 to 1550. They issued a 6pence, matching that of the English groat, a 3pence, matching that of a half-groat, a 3 halfpence, matching that of an English penny, and a 3 farthings, matching that of an English halfpenny. They all bear the name and portrait of Henry VIII, as do the English coins of the same period. The earliest coins appear to be made of English dies, others, of a cruder design, were made locally. So there we have it, a brief introduction into the coinage of Henry VIII. A lot of information gathered was used from the Spinks 2021, the Scottish and Irish Spinks 2020 book, and that of information available to us online. If you're new and interested in getting started, then I shall leave links below where you can purchase your own Spinks book. And please let me know what coinage you'd like me to cover in the future. And I thank you all for your continued support on the channel. Make sure you're subscribed so you're notified when my videos go live every Saturday evening. Thank you for your continued support, and as always, keep collecting!